1860 was a year when the United States was to elect a new president. The candidate for the Republican Party was a tall, gaunt-faced man from Illinois, Abraham Lincoln. He had said, "I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free." Across the land, he conveyed his ideas in a hard-fought campaign. Lincoln won in a close election and came on to Washington. He was aware of the open threat made by leaders of the South. The election of this black Republican, they had said, would be grounds for secession. By the time he set foot in Washington, South Carolina had already voted to secede. One after another, 10 southern states followed her out of the Union. With the firing on Fort Sumter, the Civil War had begun, and the North sprang to arms. Soon the battle was joined, the blue of the North, the gray of the South. But it was the white man's war, at least in the Union Army. Northern Negroes were eager to join the fight, but everywhere they volunteered, they were turned down, forced to stand aside as others fought the war. But even though the Army said, "You can't wear the uniform," Negroes replied, "It's our fight. This is not just a fight to preserve the Union. It's a fight to end slavery. We'll help without a uniform." At the front and behind the front, they worked for the Union cause. In the South, the slaves were alert to the new flaming spirit of liberation. By the thousands, runaways poured into the Union lines. They couldn't wait for freedom. They ran to meet it. Escape to freedom was the cry. Of many thousands, the most spectacular escape was carried out by Robert Smalls. Slave pilot of a Confederate gunboat, he stole his ship past Charleston's guns and turned it over to the Union Navy. But by the summer of 1862, it was clear the war was going badly. News from the battlefronts was grim, as the reports came in of Union soldiers dead or wounded in action. It was in this dark period, when the Union cause was at low ebb, that Frederick Douglass, the great Negro leader, spoke up. "Why fight with one arm tied behind your back?" he asked Lincoln. Both slave and free Negroes should be called into the service to fight in an army of liberation. Finally, after much hesitation, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing the slaves in all states still in rebellion. A signal they could now fight for their own freedom. And a great day of jubilee. After a short period of training, they were ready for action. The action would come very soon for the colored units, and they would be in the thick of it. In their first major battle, Negro troops won great praise. No troops could be more determined or more daring, said their commanding general, Nathaniel Banks. A daring paid for in blood through the thick of many battles. There were the days of glory, and the other kinds of days as well, when the mud was ankle deep and thoughts could wander and men yearned to be home again. The cost was heavy. At Milliken's Bend, almost half the colored unit was killed or wounded in the bloodiest hand-to-hand fighting of the Civil War. The Confederates showed the Union colored units no mercy when they had the upper hand. They would set dogs upon them, take no prisoners alive. Slowly, steadily, the tide of battle turned. The heavy weight of men and materiel bore down on a weakening South. It was no longer a white man's war in the Army and in the Navy as well. The Union Navy took into its ranks many men of dark skin. 4 of them won the Navy Medal of Honor. One such hero, Joachim Pease, was on the Union ship Kearsarge as it came under enemy gunfire. Manning the #1 gun, Joachim Pease helped the Kearsarge defeat the Alabama in a great sea duel. By war's end, 30,000 Negroes served in the Navy. 180,000 Negroes served in the Union Army, sharing in the ultimate victory that ended slavery. 38,000 Negro soldiers had died in the gaining of that victory for American democracy. The Confederate Army had abandoned Richmond. Among those who marched in to occupy the slaveholders' capital were Negro soldiers of the Connecticut Regiment. Said the beloved national leader to the colored people who rushed out to acclaim him, "You are as free as I am." It was a great day of jubilee. Yes, it was a happy day, but it was overshadowed almost at once by the actions of a madman. Wishing to avenge the cause of the South, he murdered Abraham Lincoln, and a nation was sick at heart. Gone forever was the man who had presided over the destruction of slavery. Yes, slavery and the war were over. For the North and the South, it was time to rebuild, to bind the wounds. Amid the bitter whites of the Southland, 4 million Negroes, once slaves, were now free. But free for what? Landless, homeless. They faced an uncertain future. Realizing early in the war that the freedmen would need help, abolitionists had gone south to liberated territory to aid Negroes in starting a new life. Then, in March of 1865, Congress established the Freedmen's Bureau. Against violent Southern opposition, The Bureau, supported by federal troops, acted as the Negro's friend in court or set up courts of their own. Rations and medicine were distributed to both Negroes and poor whites. The Bureau found Negroes jobs and supervised work contracts so that the worker could earn fair wages for his labor. Fair wages for his labor, one of the joys of his new freedom. For the first time, he and his family could live their days in decency and dignity. Freedmen's Bureau tried to settle Negroes in rural area freedom villages. But perhaps most important was the establishment of 4,000 schools in the South for more than 250,000 Negro students. As the first widespread free public school system in the South, it led to free education for whites as well as Negroes. Encouraged by the Freedmen's Bureau, the colored churches sent teachers and money to their brethren. Thousands of northern white men and women came into the South, some into communities so hostile that they were risking their lives every day to teach the Negroes. For although the Southerners had been beaten on the battlefield, many of them were determined life would go on as before. Here was to be slavery new style. Secret societies such as the Ku Klux Klan were formed to frighten and terrorize the Negro. At once, Negroes met in conventions to protest. Their anger at the unchanging attitude of the South was reflected in Congress. Charles Sumner and Thaddeus Stevens were two of the greatest champions for Negro rights in Washington. Under their leadership, Congress now passed the Reconstruction Act. It insisted on true democracy in Southern government and provided military power to make sure Negroes were given full rights in political life. Especially that most precious possession, the right to vote. And so dark faces began to be seen on the juries of the South. Dark faces began to be seen in the law courts as attorneys now, and dark faces began to be seen among the elected officials of the South. Negroes served in many high offices. Oscar J. Dunn, Lieutenant Governor of Louisiana. Blanche K. Bruce, United States Senator from Mississippi. One other Negro was also a senator from Mississippi. Hiram Rhodes Revels. There were many congressmen, such as Turner of Alabama, Rawls of Florida, Rainey and Elliott of South Carolina. Along with Frederick Douglass, newly appointed Marshal of Washington, D.C., their interests went beyond civil rights for Negroes to all the leading issues of their times, especially education. As one Republican leader described the Negro office holders, their public conduct would be honorable to any race. Yet more than 10 years after the Civil War was over, terror and violence were still the weapons of the Night Riders. They were grimly determined to restore white supremacy in the South. But now, when Negroes looked to Congress for help, Sumner and Stevens were dead. Their voices no longer shouted out, defending the rights of the colored people in the South. Who would speak for civil rights now? Northern industrialists and politicians were interested in most of all in promoting business expansion, South as well as North. There was money, big money to be made. Business was booming. The problem of the Negro was just a dying whisper. The North had other things to think about. And so, after the election of 1876, the protection of federal troops was withdrawn from the South. The former slaves were left to the mercies of their former masters, who within a short time wiped out the gains of Reconstruction. For the Negro, life didn't seem much different from the slavery of old. But this much was certain. Having tasted freedom, he would no longer stay down. He would rise again.